participating in this brief function, which has an introductory purpose. The idea sketched to us here, and also to greater detail, the little booklet that is being distributed is, of course, a culling of these ideas, a selective presentation of some ideas that have been processed. This is an interesting venture. There's no question of people being uncritical towards it. We'll keep a watch on these ideas. There's no question of treating them as any holy cow or set of holy cows. This has been made clear by the organizers and in particular by Mr. Nirmal. I welcome the whole venture at this stage. I think the idea of looking afresh, the whole objective of looking afresh at the situation on the ground in our country, looking at specific aspects, looking at trends in our country, comparing them with advanced international standards, including those which we have developed in the past and perhaps even in the present. This, I think, is genuinely a progressive venture. The point of departure here is not really ideas. In that sense, many other organizations, many other people are involved with ideas. That is not what can mark the organization as distinct from others. However, the purpose of looking seriously at what is going on in our midst, comparing them with a broader international perspective, particularly with advanced tendencies, is a progressive one. There's no question about that. The pursuit of excellence is a different matter. I think it depends on your definition of excellence. It depends on the content of that pursuit of excellence. It depends on who you think are the people who should benefit from this pursuit of excellence. Ideas good, there will be differences on this question. Too often, elites in our country, those in authority, promise the pursuit of excellence, and when it comes to the actual implementation on the ground, the realization of this in the lives of our society, there is a great gap, and this indeed is, I think, some of the motivation behind starting ventures like this. But excellence, if it is seriously defined in our society, and in particular by those associated with this organization. But the idea that much needs to be done in our society in the field of, say, health, in the field of education, in the field of civic amenities, in the field of various aspects of development, there can be no two opinions on that. The progress in our country is very disappointing if you lay high standards before you. There is no doubt about that. As for the radical part of it, which has been adopted by this organization, I think we should be critical about what is truly radical, what is the value of radicalism, and so on. But by radical, I take it that that the organization, the people like Nirmal need, that they want to go deeply into the situation, want to do something at a rather profound level, or at least a meaningful level, about the challenge of change. The whole idea of radicalism in this context suggests that there is much to be changed, and it has to be done at a meaningful level. Now, the problem here is that the organization problem, or the advantage in some respects, is that this organization is limited to a section of Indians, those who have either been non-resident Indians in the past or continue to be that, or those who have substantially interacted with foreign travel and so on, or have this experience of being in touch with international trends, international experiences. This is a workable group. The purpose here of, I think, limiting membership, limiting the scope of the organization to this group is that it's not that they want to exclude those who do not have these advantages, but to consolidate the advantages. And I think here, implicit in this limitation or restriction of the scope of the organization, or the specification of the scope of the organization, I think, is at least in terms of economic development, than the standards we are used to, at least at an average level in the society. This provides a vantage point, this provides an advantage. I think that is implicit in the specification of your target groups. This, of course, is insufficient. It won't solve, it won't reach out to a large enough section of our society. Often the limitation, the restriction of membership to this means that we are less sensitive, we are likely to be less sensitive to the problems of those who are outside this scope, outside this group, outside this experience, outside this prospect, outside this possibility. And in that sense, you would be representing, I suppose, some kind of privileged group. But the group is large enough, varied enough, with experience rich enough for us to warrant the takeoff of some kind of serious discussion of these aspects of our experience, of the challenge before us. Unfortunately, NRIs, non-resident Indians, have come in the recent period to have a controversial, somewhat dubious reputation, speaking generally. I don't want to tar everyone with the same brush. There are NRIs and NRIs, but when the press uses this term, what comes easily to mind, unfortunately I say, not that I share this prejudice, is the fly-by-night operator, the person whose credentials are not very clear, the person who brings a lot of money into the country without quite specifying the sources of the income. And indeed, in an interesting paper done a couple of years ago, the Brazilian Union Revenue Secretary, Mr. Sen Gupta, expressed a lot of concern over the fact that NRIs, the investors, taking advantage of the new liberal policies of the government, the new changes in the rules of the game, are able to get away with things that those who are not NRIs, Indians who are not NRIs, in a comparable position in India, would not be able to get away, got over. On the other hand, we have an admirable body of experience, which has also been recognized. People in science, people in engineering, doctors, various other professionals whose achievements make us truly proud. There is also a different kind of component, people who sell their manual or mental labor in other ways who are not in these privileged positions. However, those who make a great deal of difference to our economy in terms of the remittances they send. This, I think, is an extremely varied body of experience in this term. But unfortunately, in the recent period, the term NRI has triggered some resentment in our society, much the same way as intellectuals sometimes trigger anti-intellectualism if they don't watch out, if they're not sensitive enough to the concerns of the others. This has happened to some extent in our society. So Mr. Birmal and company are going to have problems when they really reach out. They have to give some thought to this idea. I said I do not share this prejudice. I think by and large, the Indian, those sections of our society who have gone abroad, who have emigrated for a while, who have traveled extensively, substantially, become truly international players in that sense, they have a great national asset. They represent a potential, a body of capabilities that would be developed splendidly for the benefit of our society, for the benefit of our people, for the benefit of our national unity, for our national advancement. But that is some way off. Today we feel rather mixed up, rather confused about this whole experience. And it is really up to this contingent of Indians with these ideas, with this experience, with these plans to remove the apprehensions, to dilute the prejudices in our society, to make themselves accepted here as those who have as legitimate a stake in the way we should build this nation as anyone else. Now, the project undertaken by this organization, Ex-Nora International, concerns ideas. As I said, that cannot be the point of departure because many others are concerned with ideas. The whole definition of an intelligentsia is that, as distinct from intellectuals, at least in the literature, the specialized literature on the subject, is very often they make this point that the real distinction would be the intelligentsia lives off ideas, often feed off ideas. That is what they are concerned with. Various professionals, including lawyers, including medical specialists, including scientists, engineers, various others, including, I suppose, at least a good section of journalism where it's more serious, writers and so on. But intellectuals, in the true sense, in the pure sense, very difficult to find them in real life, are supposed to live for ideas. And to some extent, if organizations such as this make a commitment to this pursuit of ideas in a rather serious way, in an almost pure way, I think then the future is clearly defined. But that is the kind of distinction that is useful to remember. That we are not just trying to exploit ideas, exploit those who can generate ideas. We are not just making a cult of information, but we are concerned with ideas that you should guard against. The trap. We must, this is what I mean when I refer to the question of justice. The sort of shorthand for those large numbers you are not even going to interact with. Let us not be condescending towards them. Let us not, when politicians hold elections, should they go to an astrologer, as they often do? There are people here who don't believe in astrology. But you can conduct your private affairs according to this. But you conduct the affairs of a state, the affairs of a nation, impose these dates on us because some astrologer who clearly disagrees with some other fixes a date and the emissary of a great man gets this thing. And this is something on which we must make up our mind. Those in Delhi, those in the seats of power in various places are not above compromises of that kind, and these do not do justice to the kind of venture we are talking about. The third question, I think, relates to corruption. We are living in the epoch of corruption, where decision making has been very badly distorted by public recognition, to the extent that there is cynicism all around about decision making. They affect defense deals, they accept industrial decisions, they affect licenses. Right now we are told that a particular minister from Tamil Nadu is sitting on the file of relating to the import of phosphoric acid. No rhyme or reason is given. This concerns crores of rupees, the imports which are related to the fertilizer industry. No rhyme or reason is provided for these decisions. Why the decision-making process has been frozen at this point? What are the considerations that are supposed to be involved? What is it all about? This is not necessarily corruption, and this is a distortion of the decision-making process that often leads to corruption. And this is a problem we have to face. It's not done by the way Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan in the old days railed against it. Where are we left after that campaign? I think it perhaps aroused people's consciousness that in terms of results, the anti-corruption movement of the 70s fizzled out and generated, I think, enormous cynicism about what could be done to end corruption in our society. Here the media, and I can claim that, I think, are playing their role. Some of them are overstating the case, some of them are making sweeping accusations, but by and large, the media, or at least the press, the non-official media, keep this question alive. And organizations like this should be particularly sensitive to detecting corruption, discovering its extent in our society, discovering its effects, doing something to arouse people against it. The other problem I think you will be concerned with would be an equal application of the rule of law. Very often institutions in this country are being twisted out of shape. One newspaper is being harassed, whereas others which show a different line are not given the same treatment. This is a problem. This is just one illustration of what happens in our society. But it is now notoriously clear that the rule of applied in an uneven fashion. Definitions are made which will not meet any minimum test to any intelligent Indian. And this is something that must be exposed, that cannot be lived with. And I think these are the kinds of concerns that I would be particularly interested in your organization taking up. The final question is, I think, is one related to the freedom of expression. Those of us who are concerned with creativity, with education, with development of people's potential and capabilities, recognize today, at least in principle, that freedom of expression has much to do with these achievements. Where universities are not free, where there is censorship, where you have a TV network like Doordarshan and a radio network like All India Radio, selecting the news, twisting it, imposing censorship, where you have books being banned, where you have textbooks being withdrawn from schools or colleges. That happened during the Janata period. Some progressive textbooks, you have a situation where a great deal of concern is warranted. Where you have an attempt to enact the coup of a defamation bill, you are asking for trouble. But fortunately for India, I think of all the developing countries, we can claim to have perhaps the largest area of these freedoms. And unfortunately, these freedoms, these entitlements, these historical gains of the Indian people, mostly won during the freedom struggle, have come under pressure and have come under strain. But I think it is profoundly important at this juncture to recognize the importance of these democratic freedoms. It's not just intellectuals, not just professionals, not just the sophisticates who need these freedoms. During the emergency, we used to hear talk about trains running on time, about discipline being guaranteed in certain ways, about ordinary Indians not really being bothered about the robbing of these freedoms. Fortunately for us, the emergency regime was defeated on this very issue because people couldn't breathe freely. People couldn't. Compulsory sterilization, in a sense, forced the issue, and it was proved beyond any doubt that ordinary Indians, including illiterate Indians, the poorest of the poor, valued these freedoms, and this is something to be proud about. At this stage, other societies, other systems, countries like the Soviet Union and China, which have followed a different path of development, have come to recognize the importance of these freedoms, the importance of the freedom of expression. That's what Mr. Gorbachev's glasnost is all about. They have understood the cost of denying their people some of this scope, and it would be completely wrong at this time to go the other way. At a time when Pakistan has gone through some kind of democratic restoration or semi-democratic restoration, it would be completely intolerable if something happened in India to indicate the other path, the other direction. So we must be watchful on this front. I would like an organization like this to place a very high value on things like the freedom of writers, the freedom of journalists, the freedom of scientists, the freedom of historians, to put out ideas right or wrong. Of course, there must be some kind of rationality involving this, some kind of responsibility involving the exercise of these freedoms. But on the whole, it is better, as Nehru repeatedly pointed out, although he did not always follow that in practice, but as he repeatedly pointed out, as in the case of Kerala, where he dismissed an elected government. But Nehru repeatedly pointed out, at least in words, at least as a purpose, that it is better to err on the side of license so far as this is concerned. That is something that an organization like this must champion and advocate. I thank Mr. Nirmal and for the others involved in this function for giving me this opportunity, and I hope that the time I have taken